Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. So I finally get to come back to making videos and updating the channel on all sorts of cool gaming and Nintendo news, and with my luck, and to my huge surprise, a pretty gigantic piece of news has come out just earlier today about The Legend of Zelda and the future of the franchise after Breath of the Wild. So apparently what's happened is really interesting and kind of strange, but potentially really exciting if it's really as true as it sounds. So apparently, there's a new Zelda Breath of the Wild book that has been announced or released or is finally shipping out to some media locations, something I had not yet heard about. Maybe a lot of you guys had, but regardless of that, it somehow had completely eluded me until this news came out. And there is a quote in this book. It's called the Zelda Masterworks book, I believe is what it is. Apparently there's a quote in it from Aonuma himself, who a lot of us know has been directing the mainline Zelda games for a couple of decades now, the last big major releases like Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, and then of course Breath of the Wild. And in that, he apparently confirms that work has already begun on the next Zelda title. Now, this comes from some Twitter page called Source Gaming, @AllSourceGaming. And you can see that here, they basically state Aonuma confirms that work on the next Zelda has already begun. And this is apparently coming from this book, this Masterworks book that they seem to have in their possession. So, okay, this is pretty cool. This is pretty huge. Now, if I'm being honest, I do have to say, kind of like I already alluded to, that it's a little bit weird to learn about this Masterworks book and then to hear this quote being stated from Aonuma, and then to find out that this Source Gaming feed apparently are like the only people that have this book, and to have the quote put in this book, and it's just really strange. And I'd never heard of these guys or this Twitter feed, and I'm not outright like dismissing it. I certainly do ultimately believe this. But it is in a little bit of a territory where I think we should all kind of wait until we actually start to see screenshots from this book and see and read the quotes for ourselves, whether it's because the book releases and we have it to read ourselves, or if screenshots of these pages actually make it online. I mean, I kind of would like to actually see those kinds of confirmations, like a visual confirmation that that's what's been put into this book. But like I said, I don't want to read too deep into it. I'm sure that ultimately this is probably pretty true. And if anything, it makes sense. I mean, to tell you the truth, I would firmly believe that pretty soon after the completion of Breath of the Wild, why wouldn't Nintendo and the Zelda team and Aonuma himself and anyone else meant to work on the game start to work on that next Zelda title? That's exactly what I think probably should happen. So at this point, with this, quote, confirmation of the new Zelda game being worked on, regardless of the fact that it obviously makes a lot of sense, suddenly we start to get excited, right? I mean, this is cool. Okay, we at least know that you guys have already started the early work on the next Zelda title. And that gets our brains thinking, okay, what does this mean? Where are they going to go with the series? What is the plan? What is the visual style and the art direction? Are they going to use the same engine of Breath of the Wild? And if they do, will they also use a similar, you know, close to exact art style as Breath of the Wild? Are they going to do a direct sequel like they did with Majora's Mask in the past? Or are they going to do something else completely brand new in their own story? And when will it come out? What platform will it come out on? All of these things are important. And also, where are they in the process? I mean, we're probably at the earliest stage of the creation of this game. I mean, we're probably just in like storyboarding and you know, just kind of meetings about the concept and the time frame that this game is going to take place in. What kind of new mechanics do they want to introduce? You know, what kind of surprises are they going to give us? What sort of old things are they going to maybe come back to? All of these things. And that's probably where we are. So I think for anyone who gets crazy excited about this and wants to read maybe too much into this and think, oh my gosh, we're going to get it in just like another 2 years, a brand new Zelda. Oh my god, they're already making the new game. I would probably suggest that we all take a big step back from this and don't get too ahead of ourselves and expect this game that soon. I think that in a perfect world, what I would like, there are two main things that I would like just when I think about the idea of new Zelda game after Breath of the Wild. You know, regardless of the confirmation today, now we're just at the point where we're talking about the next Zelda game because it feels just a little bit more real. There are two main things that I really am looking forward to in a new Zelda game that I hope they kind of try to do. The first thing is that I don't necessarily want it to be a sequel to Breath of the Wild. Of course, I will happily accept that and be excited for it. But if I was to get to choose, I would state, don't make a sequel, don't do the Majora's Mask thing again, even though I love those games. Just do another new game. Every time Nintendo does that, like the Wind Waker, like Skyward Sword, like Breath of the Wild, I love that. It's like, I kind of appreciate the pseudo-anthology and then also pseudo-sequel timeline prequel thing that they've been doing with Zelda games. I like that. So I would like them to do a whole new game set in a whole new Hyrule and a new different timeline and make weird little Easter egg connections to the other games so we can sort of figure out and guess and theorize where it takes place on the timeline. Those kinds of things work for me, and I think that I would prefer that for the next Zelda game. The other thing I would like, and I know this might be a little bit controversial, but I firmly and truly believe this, and I will stand by it until they show us otherwise, is that I actually want for them to bring back some of the older elements of older games that they eliminated in Breath of the Wild. Now, hear me out for a second, because Breath of the Wild to me is like the most 10 out of 10 game I've almost ever played. It is easily a top 3 all-time game for me, and I would certainly listen to the argument for it being the best game ever made. I don't think that that's a completely insane statement. There's a lot of possible truth to that I might even be willing to be swayed on and to believe. The game is incredible, and I loved all of the changes that they made to the game. Well, for the most part. The weapon breaking thing, I think, is good in spirit, but I don't overall love the execution from it, but, you know, it still is a 10 out of 10 game to me, so I don't really care. But there are a couple of big things that the previous Zelda games had done, and I know that a lot of people liked the idea of them getting away from some formulaic elements of Zelda, and again, I do appreciate that, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm somebody who still loves and even misses having played Breath of the Wild. I do miss the dungeon structure that they'd used for most of the 3D games since Ocarina of Time. I like having the big map to run around and you do things and you get the side quests, but you also have, you know, 7, 8, 10 main huge dungeons and temples and castles and labyrinths that you get stuck in, and there's a fire one, and there's an ice one, and there's a forest one, and, you know, it's really simple, and I know that they've done it 100 times in a row, so people get sick of that. I do get that, you guys, but I'm just gonna talk from my personal perspective, and I like that. I miss that, and I would welcome that back into a new Zelda game. Like, give us these huge temples. The Divine Beasts were great and a lot of fun, but they weren't to the same level of depth as previous dungeons in Zelda games. I want to hit work really hard to finally make it to the next big dungeon of the game and say, okay, here I am in the snow dungeon, or whatever theme they want to go with. And now I know I'm going to be stuck here for the next 2 or 3 hours, really engrossed in all of the crazy puzzles and the way this big labyrinth is put together to get to a final boss and do that thing, and then get a main item out of this temple that I will then use going forward. I know that it's formulaic and people like the idea of changing and getting away from those things, and I do too, but this is just one of the few things that I do miss from Zelda, and I would like it if maybe... I don't make games, so I guess I don't really know how to suggest Nintendo do this. I just know I would like the idea of maybe keeping the essence of the old dungeon formula and then combining it with the shrine formula in Breath of the Wild and finding some sort of cool balance and compromise between the two, and do that with this next Zelda game. Again, I don't know how to suggest that Nintendo do that because I don't make games. I just know that I like both ideas individually, but I miss the old dungeon formula, and I would like that reintroduced into the next Zelda game. Also, I would also kind of like a companion. I miss having like a Navi or a Fi or a Midna kind of character along with Link along their journey. I really, really do miss that, and that is something I hugely would like to see incorporated into the next Zelda as well. Now, the last thing I want to touch on for this new Zelda in this video is when I think we might be able to expect this game. And I'm only going to theorize and speculate. This is just Rob's opinion and Rob's guess. That's all anyone can do. And it is kind of tough to predict, I'm not going to lie. But there's something that I do feel pretty good about. And I alluded to this at the beginning of the video. I think it's pretty far off, you guys. I know it's easy to get really excited about the fact that this confirmation comes so soon after Breath of the Wild releases. So obviously the game is really far in development, and we're going to see it in like 2019 or 2020. And while nothing is impossible, I will always state that when I'm predicting or guessing something, nothing is impossible. I truly don't think we're going to see it that soon, you guys. I mean, Zelda, the mainline 3D console Zelda games are huge in scope, and Nintendo takes all the time in the world they need. They will never force or push that game out until it's complete and 100% the best version it could almost possibly be. And so, I think this game is probably 4 or 5 years off, man, just like the gaps between the last few games. Wind Waker had a pretty big gap between Skyward Sword, but in general, well, there was Twilight Princess. I don't know how I'm even forgetting Twilight Princess, oh my goodness. So, you know, there are pretty big gaps between all of those games as well. But it just feels like this game's going to be far off. So, then we come to what platform is it going to release on? And I'm going to say both what I think and also what I kind of want here. And it is that I want this game to release on Nintendo's next platform. I don't need this game to be another Switch Zelda title. Again, I will happily accept that. It's not like I'm going to turn it down if it is going to happen that way. And again, anything is possible, but I really think that what they're probably trying to do is kind of finally catch up with the Zelda release and their new hardware and console release, because for a couple of years and generations in a row, they've been behind. The schedule they've been working their games on hasn't really matched up with what they're doing hardware-wise. When you look at the fact that Twilight Princess released at the very end of the GameCube's life, right as the Wii was launching, so they made it a dual release for the Wii and GameCube, so we had a GameCube-developed Zelda game running on our brand new Wii, and then they made Skyward Sword at the very end of the Wii's life, which was great, and it was a fantastic Wii game, but that was like less than a year before their next console, the Wii U, came out, and because of that, we didn't get the Wii U Zelda until the end of the Wii U's life, which ended up being Breath of the Wild, and they ended up releasing that instead, also on the Switch, and that's the version we all loved and played. But just like with Twilight Princess, we were playing a Wii U Zelda on our brand new Switch. And so they got themselves in a weird sort of release window structure with Zelda and their hardware so that they couldn't really deliver the absolute ground-up perfect Zelda experience that is taking full advantage of what their current and brand new hardware is at that time. The closest we got to that was Skyward Sword, which happened at the very end of the life, and not enough people bought into it. I mean, it was successful and an amazing game, but it wasn't what it probably could have and should have been if it released, you know, 2 or 3 years before the end of the Wii's life. And so it's really unfortunate. And honestly, I kind of think that that's what they're going to do with the Zelda game, you guys. They're going to say, okay, we could probably get this game done in 3 or 4 years and release it as a late life Switch title right near the end of the thing and then move on to the next one. But we all know that if they do that, within another 6 months to a year, they'd end up releasing the successor to the Switch, and then we'll have that console without another brand new Zelda game made specifically for that console. So, this whole thing, what I'm getting at is that I think they're going to say, okay, we're working on the next Zelda for 4 or 5 years down the road, and this is going to be the Zelda game that we are developing on our brand new hardware, our successor to the Switch hardware. It's taking full advantage of what that machine is going to allow us to do, and that is going to be a launch title for that console that is built for that console, or that is going to be a first-year Zelda release for that console that, again, is built on that console. That's what I think they're going to do, and it is definitely what I would prefer. So it's not like I'm trying to say, you know, don't release a Zelda game in 2 years that's made only for the Switch. If they do that, great. I'm going to be excited. I'm sure it'll be great, and I'll happily play it. But I really want them to just get caught up here with the Zelda and their hardware release cycle, and I think that that's probably what's going to happen here. So yeah, that's pretty much everything going on. You know, the quotes from Aonuma confirming a new Zelda title being in the works is very exciting. It doesn't really give us a lot of info, but as per usual, the way I like to look at these things is I will extract a lot of different ideas and theories and guesses and possible details or facts out of a very small amount of information and BS to you guys about it for whatever 15 or so minutes on the internet. That's what I like to do on Rule of Two Review, and I think that we can glean a lot from this quote coming at this time and what it might mean. So tell me what you guys think. Is this exciting to you? What do you think about this? What do you think this is truly saying about the next Zelda title? Is it farther in development than we think? Maybe we're going to get it very, very soon, or maybe more like I think it's still a 4 or 5 year cycle until the next game, and maybe it's something that they're trying to release solely on their next console and not as a dual release on the Switch and its successor. So tell me what you guys think. How excited are you for Zelda? What do you think this is going to actually turn into? And that is it for me. So thanks as always for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you guys next time on another video.